I would start the evening today with Mahmoud Darwish's words. They returned from the end of the long tunnel to their mirrors. They returned. When they recovered their brother's salt, single or in groups, they returned. From the myths of defending citadels, of Mahmoud Darwish had a kind of actualization, but to a certain degree. What will happen next in Gaza and in Palestine remains unclear. But we are here in Munich, in Germany, and we all know why we are in this room instead of the originally planned venue, the LMU. But I'll state it in any case. LMU cancelled the room that they had originally allowed us to have for this meeting, stating that it might lead to Meinungskampf, a battle of opinion of sorts, and stating that they cannot guarantee the security of participants. God forbid having a battle of opinion at a university, that to a public university. And the same thing happened in FU for an event that was supposed to take place. So this attempt, which is a part of a series of such attempts at silencing critical voices, follows a very troubling pattern that we all know. And in this, the German state and its public universities have systematically suppressed anyone who dares to speak up for Palestine. This duplicity, this self-righteous hypocrisy has been so normalized that it has become a kind of principle of governance, a principle of thought. So we have witnessed, all of us, and we are continuing to witness, as Hannah Arendt, we all know who Hannah Arendt is, put it, a deep-rooted, stubborn, and at times a vicious refusal to see and face and to come to terms with what really happened. This she wrote in the post-Second World War in the 1950s. And this is what also we are seeing today, an utter refusal to see what's happening around us. And this is why we are here, all of us, because we feel it is necessary to point out that, and I'm quoting, history, or to be more precise, the history the Germans have repeatedly mucked up, in the words of Günter Grass, is a clogged toilet. They flush and flush, but the shit keeps rising. No matter how hard they try to flush it, the stench of fascism lingers heavily in the air, in the universities, in the public squares, in its institutions, and our responsibility is to make sure that it doesn't spread, that it doesn't sink deeper into the fabric of this society. And this is why we are here. That it is contained, that it doesn't, like the patterns of oppression, the patterns of erasures and distortions are resisted. And this has been at the heart of our work at our Decolonial Practices Group. And I'm going to say a few words about how our group was formed. Many of you might not know. So our group was formed in the wake of 7th of October 2023. At LMU, there was a kind of silence, or rather a silencing, that we were all subject to. We all saw how, our German colleagues, the institutions reacted when Russia invaded Ukraine. And the stark difference in the response, in how the institutions responded and all the colleagues responded when the post 7th of October 2023. So we sought to create a space, a collective, where we could step beyond the comfort of our academic bubbles, build alliances, and amplify voices that were being and are being systematically silenced. Frantz Fanon famously stated, "Decolonization is not a metaphor." Taking this injunction seriously, our activities have spanned both academic and in public spheres, within classrooms, within seminar halls, and also on the streets, and community building, fostering alliance building efforts. So our work is rooted in decolonial, anti-colonial, anti-racist, and anti-fascist thought and practice. And while our focus is global, from Palestine to Lebanon to Cyprus to Liberia to Indonesia to Latin America, our concerns are just as wide-ranging. In this decolonial spirit, in the spirit of all of those who have resisted, who are resisting, who have refused to be complicit in fascism of all sorts and oppression, who have stood unwavering against colonial erasures of all kind around the world, I introduce today's speaker. A voice of conscience, a voice for justice, for liberation, a voice that has fearlessly confronted the machinery of the settler colonial state and erasure in Palestine. Francesca Albanese is a familiar figure to all of us. I personally came to know of her when she delivered the Edward Said London lecture on the 3rd of October 2023. A few days later, we all know what happened, marking the 20th anniversary of Said's passing. In that lecture, she explored Said's enduring legacy, situating within the brutal realities of Israel's settler colonial rule over Palestine. And much of her work, following Said's work, and is dedicated to a rigorous examination of international law within the context of a global empire. She confronts Israel's colonial injustice not just as an abstract scholar, but also as someone who charts a tangible course of action for legal and humanist resistance. Francesca Albanese was appointed UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Palestinian territories occupied since 1967 by the Human Rights Council in March 2022. She brought with her a steadfast commitment to confronting injustice, exposing violations of international law, and advocating for the rights of Palestinian people on a global stage. She dedicated her first report for the right of Palestinian people for self-determination, what this concept of self-determination means in the context of settler colonial features of the Israeli occupation. In her subsequent reports, she has dealt with arbitrary and deliberate ill treatment inflicted upon Palestinians, not only through unlawful practices of detention, but also a carceral continuum comprising of techniques of large-scale confinement that we all know. In her latest report, titled Genocide as Colonial Erasure, she argues that the violence that Israel has unleashed against Palestinians post 7th October is not happening in a vacuum, but is part of a long-term, intentional, systematic, state-organized forced displacement and replacement of Palestinians. A reluctant chronicler of genocide, as she once described herself, someone who has faced down hostile Western journalists, mostly male, responding with nothing but a radiant smile and an unshakable composure and a passion and logical force that only she can summon. Someone who despises bullies, mafias, and apartheid, and I quote, a speaker of 5 languages, Italian, French, Spanish, English, and Bahasa Indonesian, a trained yoga teacher, perhaps the secret to her unwavering calm, and in her time in Jerusalem, the proud owner of the most politicized fridge in Palestine, for nothing inside it came from the settlements. Please welcome Francesca Albanese.
I took the longer route in order to have more applauses.
That was wise.
I'm joking.
Perhaps you could start with first opening remarks, and then we can slowly lead into a kind of discussion, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we want to have as many questions as possible.
Yes. First of all, if you don't mind, I would also like to echo your words of gratitude to, first of all, to the group of Decolonial Practices, because it's in its name there is a lot about what is needed right now. So thank you for existing. I know you are you're not the super large group. 24 hours in this country tells me why. So that's okay, but you're going to grow, I promise. And the second thing is that I wanted to thank you, Michael, for for welcoming all of us here. And I want to thank all of you who are here, showing the face. Because it's okay, it's not a crime to talk about Palestine, you know. And also it's not a crime to talk about Germany's implications and responsibilities vis-a-vis what's going on in the occupied Palestinian territory. But I also wanted to say hi to the students and staff and scholars at the LMU who are following us from, online, hopefully. And because I know that many have worked to have the conference at the LMU possible. And this is why when it was canceled, people asked me, how do you feel? I feel okay. That doesn't change. I feel sorry for those who have worked on these to make it happen. I feel extremely, I empathize with their frustration, but it's not my problem. This is a German problem. And it's pretty shocking that this is the only country, and trust me, it's the only country where universities, including universities who call themselves free, have given into pressure. This is, for me, gives a sense of the state of the debate in this country, and I do hope that those who have felt bad for giving into pressure will listen to our discussion tonight and see what it is all about. So, yeah, let's start.
Yes, so I think I would ask the dreaded question. Because this is something where most of us are also faced with, and we would, because we know also from your interviews and that how do we carry ourselves when asked this question, and what it also says about the notion and how it has changed, the notion of anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. And this is thrown around quite a lot.
Yeah.
And perhaps you can start with telling us about what is anti-Semitism, and when it is thrown around at us, what would be a good way to actually clarify, and in your experience, how have you done it? And what would you like to say to particularly sitting here in Germany, to people who just throw it around?
Yes, if you don't mind, Nakul, and I should also have thanked you and Francesca for the great assistance you gave me on the way to this event. But let me also say what I do.
Please.
What is the role of a special rapporteur on the? Special rapporteurs are independent experts of the United Nations. Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations, used to call us the crown jewels of the United Nations, because by very virtue of our independence and by very virtue of the reason why we are appointed, which are commitment to human rights, competence in human rights, and knowledge of the specific subject we are appointed to document and monitor, and on the basis of which we are requested by the United Nations to report to the Human Rights Council, and in some cases, like it's my case, to the General Assembly. What does it mean? It means that we serve the United Nations pro bono, and we, in my case, so there are about 50 special rapporteurs, and they report, for example, on the right to food, freedom of expression, freedom of religion. So most special rapporteurs are thematic, but there are also country mandate holders other than myself, on Afghanistan, on Iran, on Cambodia. And what the country mandate holders, what are we mandated to do? To produce reports to the United Nations based on the investigation we have carried out on the findings. In my case, I have to monitor and document the violations of international law attributable to Israel, because when my mandate was created, there was no Palestinian Authority yet. And that take place in the territory that Israel has occupied as of 1967, the Palestinian territory. So the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And on the basis of those findings, I have to make recommendations to member states, but also engage with civil society and others as I deem necessary to the delivery of my mandate. And then, of course, receive individual complaints and investigate those, interacting with responsible states. As I'm often accused to be biased because my mandate only look at Israel. And so, in a way, one could say yes, because there is also the Palestinian Authority. But as I explained, not only the Palestinian Authority didn't exist and Hamas didn't exist when the mandate was created 33 years ago, and at that point the occupation was already about 30-year-old. So the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, the East Jerusalem and the West Bank had already been for nearly 3 decades under Israeli military dictatorship. Rules written by soldiers, enforced by soldiers, draconian rules written by soldiers, enforced by soldiers, and enacted and reviewed in military courts. Even children go through military courts in the occupied Palestinian territory. So, however, I've tried also, to the best of my capacity, to do something that other rapporteurs have not done, to also investigate the violations committed by the de facto authorities, Hamas, in the Gaza Strip, and the Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank. In East Jerusalem, there is only Israel. However, something that is not very common in this part of the world is that there is such an entrenched asymmetry between Israel and the Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory that it's impossible to describe the violations of one without thinking of the overarching problem, which is the illegality of the occupation and the apartheid it carries with it, and today the crimes that are committed. And so this is why I mean, bias, what is bias? I think I'm as impartial as one can get, because impartiality shouldn't be confused with ignorance. Impartiality shouldn't be confused with indifference. And if you want to see me really hitting the roof, is when I hear that universities need to be neutral places. Since when universities are humanitarian actors with boots on the ground? Since when? Because neutrality is when you zip your mouth because you can be killed or your personnel can be killed. And this is why you do not take sides. But here it's not about taking sides, because there are not two sides. This is not a conflict like Russia-Ukraine. And it seems to me that the European universities have been very vocal on the conflict in Russia-Ukraine. This is the only conflict that Germany, first and foremost. Seriously. What happened to freedom of expression? What happened to academic freedom? Because universities should first and foremost, sorry, I will stop soon. Universities should be first and foremost places where we can bring our knowledge, ideas, not only places where young people form themselves as critical minds and future citizens of these states or other states, but also debate, exchange ideas. And universities are places where it's possible and necessary to disagree. Apparently not in Germany. So the thing is that after observing the facts, according to international law, what am I supposed to do? To tell what I found. And it's not my responsibility to be equidistant between whatever parties are intended, but also for those of you who are younger than me, the majority, thankfully, in this room. I mean, I grew up in a place where there was no in a time where there was no confusion about, there was support for the state of Israel because of all the reasons that you have in this country as well. But there was also incredible support for the Palestinians. No one would dare to compare the Palestinians and the Israelis, because the Palestinians do not have their rights to exist as a people. They're still denied. Now it's confused, because the Oslo process has confused everyone. And now speaking the truth has become a revolutionary act and something that is taken as controversial. When I grew up, no one could be ever accused of anti-Semitism, supporting terrorism, or being biased for criticizing the state of Israel. And it was much more common earlier. I encourage you to go back to the resolutions and to the debate within the General Assembly during the 60s and 70s. Israel was treated as a colonial endeavor and as an occupation that was tantamount, maintaining an occupation that could be tantamount to aggression. So because this was the time of decolonization, this was the time where the Global South made its entry into the United Nations. What is anti-Semitism? I'm not an authority, of course, but I've learned. I've learned. Because it was very painful. As I was telling yesterday, the first time they started telling me that I was an anti-Semite, I was breathless. Oh my God, light struck. Oh my God, what have I done? What have I said? Because you don't really know. You can't really articulate what anti-Semitism is, right? You know that it has to do with the Jewish people, but you do not. And this is when I learned. Anti-Semitism. I learned to articulate it and to defend myself. And I've learned it with many Israeli friends and scholars. There are many scholars who have signed a declaration that I encourage you to read, the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism, which defines anti-Semitism is discrimination against the Jews because they are Jews. Discrimination against the Jewish people because they're Jewish. Criticism of the state of Israel is not anti-Semitic, unless you want to say that criticizing Israel and Spain is anti-Christian, because we're very, very, very Catholic. or they're criticizing any country, which has, so all of you, all of the Western states who criticize Arab states for how poorly they treat women and their misogyny, you are Islamophobic. So you see, we need to use what happened to our critical mind. So again, I know we are not all born with courage. But the point is that we need to draw a line, because it's not just about courage. Here they are taking away our fundamental freedoms. And it's very scary. It's no longer about Palestine. It's no longer about the Israelis and the Palestinians. When I see people, police officers in Europe, using the stick against people standing against justice, when I see in this country the Jewish people being lectured about what anti-Semitism is, I say something has gone wrong. And again, how do you protect yourself from it? Well, first of all, you need to feel strong of who you are, and who you are is not defined by what others tell you. You need to be able to take risks. And here there is no one. I've assumed that I take risks for me, for my family. It's not an easy road. But again, because of our past as European, and I was saying yesterday as an Italian, it's because of what we have done to so many people. And last but not least, because it was so industrialized and mechanic and revolting, the Holocaust, which was perpetrated against the Jewish people. And it's great. When I came here to Berlin the first time, it's great the process you embarked on to be aware and not to do that again. And when I came to Berlin the first time, I was really impressed by, how do you call the stumbling stones? I wonder if you have it also for the Roma and Sinti or for the Nama and Herero. Probably you should. Because there was the genocide of the Jews, the Roma and Sinti, was not even the first genocide in that century that Germany committed. Why do you have this selective sense of guilt, I wonder? And this selective sense of responsibility. So you see, it is, again, I'm strong because I have a UN mandate. And I feel a sense of responsibility that it goes beyond who I am as a person, as a lawyer, etc., etc. But we need to be very clear about who we are today as students, as scholars, as staff of university staff, or activists and journalists. It pierces my heart when I see people fearing to go to a conference about Palestine after that 70,000 Palestinians have literally been slaughtered with your weapons. And you are scared to put your face on it? Not you. It's a dark present.
Yes, I think there were so many questions that I wanted to ask that you've already kind of hinted at.
It's my specialty.
Yes. So maybe let's slightly unpack one by one. I wanted to ask, how was it for you when you came to Germany? And Germany in particular, in opposition to other Western European countries that you have traveled through in the last few days, but also the response. And what is it about this German response, how does that kind of make you feel, but also not personally, but in a sense of what is a way in which we can carry ourselves in relation to this response? And so that was the first question. That one question. And the other thing that came to my mind when you were talking about Sinti and Roma people, genocide in Namibia, a Swedish writer named Sven Lindqvist. I remember him writing a book called Exterminate All the Brutes, and that's a statement from Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. But the kind of argument that he makes is the history of Europe, particularly the modern history of Europe, is a history of genocides committed by the European people on the non-European people. So, I mean, I think particularly when it comes to Germany, and you already referred to a selective memory. How do we, what kind of explains this, in your opinion? So those are my two questions.
Yeah, they're difficult questions because, again, there is, I don't want to share opinions for the sake of opinions. So also because I'm on a journey, I'm also learning. There are so many things that were not clear to me, and I start to link dots and to put the pieces together. And as we talk, Nakul, at a certain point, I would also like to reflect on your group and what decoloniality might mean. Because one thing I'm learning is that colonial practices have a matrix, have like a blueprint somewhat. So we should also look at what has been done to groups in Europe. I mean, I often think of those who were burned by the Inquisition, who didn't conform to a given model. It was patriarchy and it was Christian. To the indigenous people, like the Sami in Scandinavia. How come they were considered non-white? They were non-Christian, paganism. So again, we need to see where this whole thing comes from and how it has traveled across history. And so let me ask your questions in an orderly fashion, but just saying that we are part of a journey of discovery and self-discovery, which is painful, but necessary if we want to get to a better place. How it was coming to Germany? Look, I'm generally happy to go and talk to people. This is good, whatever it is. As I said, surely yesterday, no, and even before, yeah, I know, because I have interaction with, not direct interaction with your governments. We seem to insult each other on Twitter, and nothing else. But I engage with many German legal scholars, colleagues, former colleagues, friends, and many of them all of them, are pretty horrified and ashamed. I say, yeah, but the question is, what are you doing? The question is always, what are you doing? So I arrived to Germany with this question. I really want to see, and you don't have to answer me one by one, but I would like you to reflect on what you do to change it. And yesterday, I took a decision that I need to enforce for myself. I was so happy to come here and no one asked me for a selfie. I hate pictures. And I do that because, I'm Southern Italian, so people carry this figurine with the saint because they give them inspiration in moments of darkness. So I put myself into this. I say, if this is a picture with me makes them feel better, why not? But now there will be a price to pay. You take a picture, and then you have to promise. You have to make with me, you make a commitment that you are going to say something good about Palestine, Israel, call it whatever you want, and you are going to do something other than posting this on social media. Huh? What did you say?
Gladly.
So it was an appreciation. Yes. I always give space to everyone, just I don't bite all the time. And so, I arrive here, and again, I noticed that there are some issues. There is a lot, even the discussion before this, don't be scared, and it paints a picture that is very dangerous. I don't blame any of you. I wouldn't feel comfortable in living in a country where you cannot talk about a people who's been genocided. I hear your chancellor and his opinion, which I respect, but with one point that he didn't consider. the obligation of Germany to stop whatever is happening in the occupied Palestinian territory, at least not to transfer arms, do not have to wait for the ICJ to conclude that Israel has committed genocide. You know why? Because on January 26, 2024, the International Court of Justice recognized the possibility of the risk for the rights protected under the Genocide Convention in the context of the Israeli assault on Gaza, which, put in simple terms, means a risk of genocide, of genocidal acts being committed in Gaza. Enough to trigger state responsibility to prevent genocide, because under the Genocide Convention, if you want, Nakul, after we can also unpack genocide. I think it's very helpful here, because genocide, you don't need to have concentration camps. That is particularly sadistic and brutal. Seriously. However, it's not the only one. And you can have genocides without concentration camps. And just to say to the Jewish people have been genocided through various means, including starvation in ghettos, before being brought to the... Really, it's been interesting. I would like to have an exchange about what do you know about the Holocaust, because I was asking you, and you're probably not German educated since ever. Mm-hmm. So I would like to understand what is told to you about the Holocaust, because I can tell you what I've learned when I was in school, and still was very, very good to shape me as a human being and then as a lawyer, and then what I have understood later. But however, there is, sorry, I'll the question. It's my peculiarity, I'm so tired. So, no, I remember. And so when I realized that there is an issue relating to reality right now. And I'm very happy that we have this discussion so that people can also feel more, not empowered, but like a little bit more relaxed. For me, it has been an hallucination this past 15 months. Horrible. It has been horrible. I mean, when I look back at some interviews that I've done, I could see how much I've aged over 15 months. I mean, it's not that I looked 25 2 years ago, but I look 10 years young, 10 years older right now, and I feel it. I feel it in my body. It has been extremely, extremely painful to see what has been done to the Palestinians, to see the Israelis doing this to the Palestinians, and of course, this doesn't take away anything from the horrors of October 7. It was that awareness that made me think back then, maybe this is the time where everyone can embrace Palestinians and Israelis with wisdom and compassion. These are the first words that I used on October 8th as I started being interviewed. And sorry, Nakul, what was the second question you asked me?
I think I myself forgot. But I think I like the way in which these go tangentially and they kind of tell a story. So
Greta Thunberg told me as we were in the car saying, you have ADHD. I say, oh, maybe it's this window system that opens a lot of No, and that also you have to understand, and thank you for your patience. This is probably the 15th or 20th public talk I've had in 15 days, probably more, and across 3 countries. But again, just for you to understand, no other country, no matter the pressure, has cancelled an event, not other. A talk. Yes, in Canada, there was one in the university who cancelled a room, and then we got another room which was much bigger and better. And, and the other thing is in Italy, one university cancelled an event on October 7th where me and Ilan Pape were invited. I don't think I need to introduce anyone to Ilan Pape. And they say, no, because it's not respectful. I mean, how do you dare thinking that we are going to say something disrespectful? How? And so Ilan and I wrote to the university. University replied immediately, didn't reconsider the decision. There was mounting protests. There were journalists covering these, the students, very young students. This young lady super motivated, super strong, super articulate. And I say, aren't you scared? And she said, I don't care. And this is the beautiful thing about young people, because you have less ties, probably less mortgages, less children, and blah, blah, blah. So appreciate the challenges we have at our age. However, eventually, not only the event took place, there were 500 people in the room, and there were in total there were 1,000 or around 1,000 or more than 1,000 inside the universities and with screens. And the same thing, I mean, wherever I go, there are people who come and listen, and there is nothing wrong. So yeah, we need to continue creating this. But you ask me, what helps you? It's knowledge, and it's the strength that comes from everyone. I mean, we focus on the criticism against me. But why don't we look at the support? So many countries have expressed supports for my mandate. I've been invited to visit countries from Latin America, including Europe. I always quote, not many, but the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain told me, oh, usted es un orgullo europeo. You make us proud as European. That's nice. Yeah, it's quite unique in Europe, but it was not the only one. So, yeah, of course, there are countries who accuse my mandate and take it very personal. That's fine. There are not many, really not many. The majority of member states support my mandate and stand with the rights, for the rights of the Palestinians and for the Israelis, so that they can get decolonized. Because no one can thrive in a society that is predicated upon the dehumanization of the other. No one can brutalize another people without losing a bit of their own humanity. And this is what's happening to the Israeli people. And this is why I'm saying we need to be really to act with wisdom and compassion toward everyone.
I would like to open up the discussion, but I have one question before this, and then we have two mics there. So we'll start taking questions. But one question that I would like to also ask, as an expert, as an international law expert, I've read opinion pieces about how what is happening in Gaza as a break of sorts, meaning break of continuity of sorts, where the international law is so ineffective, even though in principle it might exist on paper, but the effectiveness to which it has been put, I can also think of, for instance, Iraq war, and nothing came out of it. And so maybe you can, as an expert, address this. You also mentioned this yesterday, this international system versus international law. Yes. Maybe you can perhaps say a few things on this.
Yeah, actually, Nakola, I'm glad you are asking this question, because yesterday I had the feeling that sometimes I take things for granted. I take for granted that everyone knows the difference between multilateral orders and international law. And international law is not UN General Assembly resolutions and UN Security Council resolutions. International law is made of treaties that member states have signed. It's like agreements. And when you sign an agreement, you have duties and responsibilities. You have rights, duties, and responsibilities stemming from that agreement. And there are many, many treaties. So international law, there is no question, I remember the second point you raised now. There is no question that international law historically is part of those 500 years that you describe, that you refer to. 500 years where white Christian Europeans have dominated the rest of the world and have used religious conversion or education and this civilization mission that still lingers in the veins of humanitarianism. How much we enjoy being the white saviors, don't we? And also frankly the work of some NGOs. And again, this is Palestine for me has been a way. a microcosm through which I've understood so much of the world, you know? But so, going back to your question, so international law is this set of rules that, yes, have formed throughout history and have mainly reflected the relations of power and have been crafted primarily by European powers. That's true. However, there are two things that should not be missed. The first part is that the world is now not what it was 80 years ago, or even 70 years ago, or even 60 years ago, because of decolonization. When the United Nations was formed, it was made of a little over 50 member states, and now is 193. And it has democratized. And the multilateral order is not just the set of rules that member states have, which include civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights, the Convention Against Apartheid, the Convention Against, the Genocide Convention, the Refugee Convention. Then there is a multilateral order, a system, meaning the mechanisms of the multilateral order, which has these rules, but also mechanisms to enforce the rules. So we have the standards, the rules, the treaties, we have enforcement mechanisms supposed to execute the rules, but what happens when the rules are not respected? And this is the question now. So I deeply, deeply disagree with the question, international law serves no purpose. Excuse me. No, this is not true. And also, if we get into this defeatism, not only we have not understood anything about what international law is in this most powerful part that we are still somewhat enjoying, and we really need right now. But also we don't understand, we take away from people something that is very powerful. So the word is emancipation. And a part of international law is the result of human emancipation. You think that the system we have right now is ugly? It's because of colonial amnesia. It's because of historical amnesia, because we do not treat the history for what we have done. The fact that, again, international relations, you study, like, I suppose, unless you go on a path of decoloniality and critical race theory, as it was not my case until I was 27, you understand that international law is the law that exists among states and regulate relations, blah, 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 and then very neutrally presented the treaties, the conventions. And the history, where is it? We don't say that international law has been used, in fact, to justify slave tradery, slavery and slave trade. And we forgot, and here comes human rights, that the first human rights movement was the one that started in this part of the world against slave trade. Because of course there was also movements in Africa to oppose this. There were wars. People were killed also to oppose the slave trade. But in countries like the UK, there was a huge movement that led to this. I mean, this is another way to teach human rights. Explain where human rights stem from. You know how many women have been burned alive, killed, locked in psychiatric hospitals, or maimed or raped as they were struggling for their rights, and how many peasants and how many indigenous people. And now that we have those norms, and now that, and especially the right of self-determination, it existed, it was recognized as a positive right only in the 60s. But the Palestinians were among those people who were recognized already in the 20s as mature enough to walk on the path to civilization alone, without the white Christian people carrying them by the hand. And so they just had to be accompanied toward democracy. But the Brits, that was bad. But however, and the British colonization has planted the seeds for the dispossession, the dismemberment of, and the disempowerment of the non-Jewish people of Palestine. We need to own this history, because today, when they tell you that international law is useful, human rights are precious, and this is what is necessary right now. There are people who are resisting in courts today by using these guarantees, the fact that we have human rights. What's wrong? Why are you always looking there?
No.
Okay. Sorry, I'm a bit tense in German. And so you understand, and this is let me just say that because we need to understand that until a few decades ago, I'm not getting there. I'm saying until a few decades ago, another country with bad colonial records and people of African descent. I mean, I had people from Africa in zoos. This is who we are as a humanity. And today, bad or good, the reality is that there are less wars, there are less people dying, life expectancy has gone higher, has become longer. So again, this is a moment where we cannot sit idle and expect that everything that has been the result of emancipation of those who have preceded us, including workers, operates by itself. We need to act. So we have the law that can be yet a tool for our emancipation, but we need to defend our rights, and we need to stand up and stick to one another as togetherness. We are not fragile if we stick to one another, if we help those who are fired, if we crowdfund to pay legal expenses for strategic litigation, because you still have independent courts. I don't know if we will be able to say the same in a few years, but now we have that window of opportunity.
Nakul, may I add one little question on this issue?
Sure, you can start, but then we'll open for everyone
there was
to.
one.
But
Yeah,
then,
I saw you, don't worry.
Perhaps you can start, but please be quick.
Okay. How do you estimate the danger here, not only in Germany, that they say now, and not only the extreme rights, maybe all the big parties of Germany now, that the Geneva Refugee Convention is useless and we have to abolish it?
Well, the problem is that there is, as Knuckles asked me, there is an erosion of the international system, but it has not started in Gaza. I think it has, the system has not served everyone equally. I mean, people in the global north have benefited from it more than people in the global south. Again, excuse me, this language, I really need to figure out how to say the white Caucasian around the world, the settler colonial bloc, just to understand each other. And Europe and its offsprings. And the thing is that we risk to lose it. And Gaza has been the revelatory moment of the entire system. The system is exposed in its brutality, but it's also in its opportunities. So, how dangerous it is. It is dangerous. It is dangerous that people keep on calling for the dismantlement of that system. In my country, they call this attitude sovereignism, which is a way to escape the rules that we have set as common rules and universal rules. So it's not enough now to violate those rules at international level, to consider international law as a pick and choose menu, because this cherry picking has already weakened for a long time in the international system. And Israel has been, as Rassegal says, the state of exception, systematic state of exception. So that doesn't mean that other states do not violate international law. Of course they do. But with this systematic attitude and posture and hubris, no. So look, it's dangerous for all of us who believe in human rights and fundamental freedoms. Of course, there is a shrinking space for the exercise of these freedoms. So I would say stand against those who are calling for the dismantlement of these guarantees. This is the only thing I can say. And also I understand, you see, This is where the Constitution comes to fruition. Respecting international law is one of the raison d'etat of this, I don't know how to say that in Germany,
Staatsräson.
yeah, that thing. I cannot speak German, it's really difficult for me. So international law, like in my own country and in the Netherlands or in other European countries, is part of who we are as a nation, the rules that the foundational rules we have as a society, we have as societies. So constitutional lawyers, scholars need to speak out and defend, and really call out the bluff here. They're not just dismantling international law. They are dismantling a constitutional order that constitutes an impediment to whatever plans and designs these people here, like in my own country, might have, the plans that they might have. And look, again, there is something that is going to be very hard to process. I heard it last year by Agnes Calamar, the Secretary General of Amnesty International, and she has repeated it this year recently as we were in an event together in Denmark. Of course, changing 1 year. Last year she said, listening to what has been said against the Palestinians from Israeli leaders and the cohort of sycophants who have accompanied that genocidal logic, and said, we are not in 2024. We are in 1924. And last year I said, isn't it too much? And now I understand what she says, because I see the rise of the rights, of the illiberal ideologies, the spread of illiberal ideologies, and let alone Palestine and Israel. But the racism that travels across the veins of our societies in Europe, it's really scary. Why can't we just be kind to each other?
So we have, thank you. We have 2 mics. Maybe, I think, someone, perhaps we can start from here. Who has the mics? You have the mic already. Okay.
There is a gentleman over there. He had raised his hand before everyone.
I think because they are the ones who are taking care of the mics.
Okay.
So maybe.
I'm so unruly. Okay. Sorry, Nakul.
No, please. Okay. It's okay.
Thanks. Thank you for this informative discussion, and it's a true pleasure to meet you in person. My name is Mahdi. I'm originally from Lebanon. I actually have 2 questions, if you don't mind, but they're kind of linked to each other. So, so many European states, as we all know, they publicly condemn colonialism and racism while continuing to uphold economic and political structure that reinforces both, whether through new colonial trade policies, restricting immigration laws, or even criminalizing the resistance movements throughout the world. How can we push beyond symbolic anti-racist and truly dismantle these systems at both an institutional level and grassroots level that is also rooted within the society? And also, what role does the education play in not only acknowledging colonial history, but in actively decolonizing European countries from within? Thank you.
Okay, in order to recognize racism, we need to understand what racism is and see it. I have the feeling that many of us in our societies do not see racism. Now, I don't think that there is a society. This is my experience. I live in, and I've been living abroad outside of Italy for 20 years. I do see, for example, how more racist my country has become, but there is no country which has no racism. There is always someone to be racist against. And in Indonesia, there was still a caste system, although it's been dismantled. In India, there is still racism, and so in Tunisia, where I live right now. We need to see that. And the thing is that, where you have legislations that ban racism, at least that become justiciable. Problem is, and it leads to the second part of your question, is education. We really need to educate ourselves. But what we need to educate ourselves about, and I think it's equality, what equality means, and what humanity means. But we are the only earthlings who are capable of discriminating, on the grounds of whatever among us. Find another species who does it. And again, I do think that there is, I can only tell you, because again, my brain functions in terms of international law, although sometimes I venture outside this because I really want to be understood by the people without convoluted language and so on. But I think that every time, because racism is the most pernicious danger we have in all societies, this is where the greater efforts should go, at the state level, communal level, faith groups, etc. And this is not the case. We don't treat each other as human, and still there are so many barriers. Schools have a huge, the education system, the institutional education system, of course, has responsibilities, because first of all, our universities, let's start with universities. It would be so much easier if they were decolonized. If, for example, I often point to the colonial dimension of legal studies and legal disciplines. But what about anthropology? Of course, I learn a lot from anthropologists, but it's so interesting to see how anthropology has got into a critical path of self-reflection and has started to see how colonialism has affected it. And when this path started, when this process started, it was useful also to other to other disciplines like legal studies. What about history? Why do we teach in this part of the world, or primarily our history? Now, talk to anyone in the education system from South Africa to Senegal to Indonesia. They know more about us than we know about them. How come? And again, this is why I think that there is a huge responsibility for each education system, from universities or probably from schools up to universities. But we need to change as human beings, because eventually behind any policy, there is us. And this is why we need a cultural revolution. But can I say something positive? And again, it comes from the young people, because I think that there is a lot of stepping out of the beaten path in terms of, I see, for example, how many people embrace cultural activities or as professions. It's a sign of, for me, it's a way to resist the schemes and the system itself, to step out of the charted territory. The fact that it comes primarily from young people who also seem not to be very engaged in politics I don't think so. And this is something that I've learned over the past 2 years. I think that many of you, but like this event demonstrate, want to be part of a political process as a polis, a place where we all gathered, and perhaps not through the structures, the political parties that exist. It should be our generation that comes to you and say how we can work together. So this requires so much abnegation that I don't see this coming very soon. So there was a good and a bad news. We need a revolution.
We can perhaps take 2 questions, one there and then one here. Yes. Is it okay if we take 2 questions?
Yes.
Okay.
My question is about, when Israel was admitted as member of the UN, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it was based on two conditions. The first one is accepting the partition plan of 1947, and the other one is accepting the resolution 194 about returning the right of return of Palestinian refugees and their right to be for reparations. Both of these conditions have been violated, like the partition basically by having an occupation that is now still there, and there is recently the advisory ICJ. Yeah, and about the right of return, this is something that Israel never have recognized, and we see like now with the honor trying to restrict UNRWA. They didn't mandate UNRWA, but they tried to restrict it, restrict their resources. And there are many people who have many prominent people who have called for the suspension of Israel's membership in the UN, including yourself. So first, I want to ask: is this something that we can really see in the future, and what are steps that can be done? Because this will be in the service of enforcing international law, and if it happens, what potential could it have be to really achieve the long-awaited self-determinance of the Palestinian people?
Okay.
One more question here.
Hi, Francesca. Lovely to see you again.
Thanks.
I was there yesterday for context, sorry. Okay. You spoke multiple times today about the universities, and you've mentioned them very briefly. And you've also been made aware of the fact that there has been a petition that was also created then by students and staff of the same university that had decided to cancel your talk. And we've had over 1,200 signatories, people from Tokyo, people from New York, from Barcelona, from London, from Cairo.
200?
1,200.
Ah, okay.
1,200 people signed it so far, and professors from all over the world. But notably, when I was looking through the list of signatories, there were quite very, very, very few professors from Germany, and even more noticeably, almost no professors from that specific university or even from the TUM within the same city. Now, I had studied there, and perhaps I expected that a UN Special Rapporteur would be immune to that same level of repression, perhaps, that the students may have faced, in my naivete, I guess. And my question is, does this isolation of essentially all avenues of Germany, the governmental one as well as the academic one, surprise you in any capacity? And what does that possibly mean? What do the students need to do? What do the alumni need to do? And since you're just going to speak on colonialism multiple times today, not to hog the mic here, but if you could ever get the chance, I have multiple times heard while studying there at the university during my bachelor's and my master's studying political science and arguing with a lot of Europeans that they would always say, the argument about colonialism is just useless. It's so old. Colonialism has no effect on the modern world. Why are we even discussing it anymore? Now, as someone who comes from a country that's been colonized, I think I know the answer, but our voices seem to not often be relevant just by virtue of where we come from. Could you then, within your responses when speaking on colonialism, actually speak on why it is so pivotal to, as you said, decolonize these institutions and look at history regarding how colonialism has affected modern times and how it still continues to do so? Thank you.
I'm not texting. I'm taking, just for the, I'm taking notes. Because Nakul didn't think of putting paper and pen here.
Guilty.
No, it's also environmentally friendly, but just wanted to say I'm not doing my business here.
Maybe the first question about Israel.
No, why don't we take 3 questions? And
one more?
So, yeah.
Carolina?
So I need to have pressure, time pressure.
Now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, thank you so much for coming here and for your great talk so far. I have a question regarding German universities' role in international law violations. There's a group in Munich, a group of researchers who actually researched German universities Munich University's ties to militarized Israeli institutions. And they created a report based on these collaborations. And I looked at it yesterday, and I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on this. For example, there's one case where the researchers listed proof that TU Munich, which is Germany's #1 university, is collaborating with Ariel University, which is an institution located in an illegal West Bank. They posted a job listing of a co-supervised PhD position together.
Is it still on?
I don't know if it's still on, but this PhD position was posted 2 years ago. That's what it says in the report, so I assume someone applied and it's ongoing. There was one research project they posted last year. It's also in the report where it says Ariel University in collaboration with TU Munich. And it's a project about architecture and AI. So this is one case that I saw yesterday, and I found it a bit disturbing because Ariel University, being located in an illegal settlement, is a completely illegal institution. And this is just one example. This report is 50 pages long, and I was really surprised to see, not surprised, but really shocked to see all of this. There's also examples of military collaborations. For example, TU Munich participated in a research project a few years ago. It's literally a German-Israeli missile research project, which is where students from TU Munich, together with the Technion, Israeli Technion, created an experimental missile together, which is all really concerning to look at. And German universities, and particularly Munich universities, are not planning to cut these collaborations. They are increasing them. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on this, on collaborating with an illegal institution in an illegal settlement? TU Munich even went there to give a workshop, which is also in this report. And what do you think generally of this, what the implication is of German universities intensifying their collaborations with heavily militarized Israeli universities? Thank you.
Three questions.
Okay. So, there are probably, I've studied, and others have studied, even in greater depth that I've done, the relationship between the United Nations and Israel. And to put it mildly, as Ras Sigal says, Israel has always been a state of exception. Why? For the reasons you know, because politically, and then for other reasons, at least two, that it's not obvious to think about. Surely there is this sense, I would like to really to position the sense of guilt thing, because the level of hypocrisy that goes in that doesn't really allow us to talk about guilt. Guilt is something else. Guilt is something deep and comes generally, if it's healthy, from a place of humanity. And I don't think it's really that. I don't think that the reason why the State of Israel was immediately recognized as a member of the United Nations had much to do and was entirely linked to the sense of guilt toward the Jewish people. Because what I know is that the Jewish people have continued to be, including after the Holocaust. It's not that the day after the Holocaust, all of a sudden they were welcomed by people saying, we are so sorry for what we have done to you. No. And there are Jewish scholars who have written about that and say how badly, how poorly they were treated, including in other countries in the settler colonial bloc. It's clear that they didn't want to be in Germany and in many other parts of Europe. Because let's be frank, how many people have collaborated with a project of eliminating the Jewish people from Europe? The Holocaust wouldn't have been possible had it been just an endeavor of soldiers. And this is why, see, watching a movie like The Zone of Interests is so powerful, because it shows you that we cannot have something as horrible, disgusting, and criminal. And the scale was incredible. Like the Holocaust, hadn't it been for the complacency and the total dehumanization of the Jewish people. Noise in the background. And so the State of Israel was created and welcomed as a way to turn the page with the past. And for many Jewish people, there was no alternative to Palestine. Because, I mean, while it had started as a colonial project, for many there was no other place, because Europe was not a place where they could ever belong. And Australia and the United States and other places in the settler colonial bloc were not very welcoming either. Guess why? Because in our veins there is this resistance. It's not that we have always, immediately after the Holocaust, all of a sudden, people became friendly to the Jewish people. This is why I'm saying we need to get a little bit more introspective and go deeper into what anti-Semitism was, and it continues to be. The matrix of seeing the Jewish were the other in our land. Of course, it was not the first genocide that was committed. However, it was the first genocide committed in Europe. In Europe 100 years ago, while millions of colonized people had been genocided from the United States of America, Canada, Africa, Australia, and the Asia Pacific, genocided or exterminated or subjugated as part of colonialism, this was the place where, and Germany was the one which started it, where colonial practices that, by the way, had been experimented on the Nama and Herero, resisting the occupation by Germany, resisting the exploitation. And the revolt of the Nama and Herero was crushed in a sort of self-defense mode, because they were what we would call today, I mean, whatever, it's again, there is always a security problem. There is often a security problem. This is what settler colonial literature leads us to think. So the reason Israel has always been exceptional in a way, and what we see, I will answer some questions in the same, including the third. But so there is this that we need to fully understand the historical reasons, but also increasingly economic reasons and geopolitical interests. I mean, eventually Israel became, as Rashid Khalidi says there is a wonderful book, Sowing War, I think is the title, and he talks about how Israel has been part of the strategic interest of Western countries, the United States first and foremost, in the region, in the Middle East, as a sort of bulwark to contain during Cold War, the spreading of socialist ideas in the Arab world. And the thing is that today there is another element, and this is where I really encourage you to read Anthony Lowenstein, Palestine Laboratory, because it's mind-blowing in how much knowledge it brings, and also thanks to the work of Israeli lawyers who have investigated the complicity. So in a nutshell, what the book exposes is the fact that Israel is deeply a military state which has experimented techniques, weapons, surveillance, containment strategies on the Palestinians, treated as guinea pigs in a laboratory, that all this could be sold abroad. And in fact, Israel has been providing, Anthony says, Israel needs to be a military state, because in order to maintain a system of racial domination where it is a demographic majority in the land that between the river and the sea, because de facto there is the control of from Israel over the land between the river and the sea, it needs to use force to subjugate other people. And this force is strategically crafted and sold, exported around the world. And Israel, and Anthony and Etaimak, a lawyer who's been working on it, again, he doesn't necessarily support my work, but I think that his work has been phenomenal in exposing this, how Israel has exported the outcome of its military industry from Chile, Argentina, to former Yugoslavia, Rwanda, Guatemala, countries that were committing crimes, brutal dictatorship. Is it common knowledge in Germany?
I'm not so sure. Not really. Doesn't feel.
So these are things. It was not known. I mean, I hadn't realized until I read this book. I hadn't put all the pieces together. I was familiar with Etaimak's work, and he's a lawyer who has worked to hold Israel accountable in Israeli courts on Israel's violations of its own laws, not to help states who commit crimes against humanity or other war crimes. Well, it does, and it has never been accountable in Israel and outside. But so today we also need to understand that this part, Israel produces surveillance and mass containment techniques that are purchased by everyone, including countries who have no diplomatic relations with Israel. And this is the problem, how we disentangle ourselves from this. It's a choice, and it is to be accompanied by in the name of Palestinian self-determination, but also our own protection, because there is an Israelization and Palestinization of the world. We need to really to draw a line. Universities, what does it tell about Germany? The fact that they counsel a UN Special Rapporteur is very serious. It's very serious, because UN Special Rapporteurs have the rank of ambassadors, somewhat, of the UN. So when we go to a country, normally it's expected that we meet the Minister of Foreign Affairs. It's even problematic when but it's okay. I mean, and it's not. But it's very, very, very telling that they do not receive. That universities do not allow a special rapporteur to talk, and there is so much defamation and reputational damage against someone who frankly serves on a pro bono basis, and out of I don't have an agenda, I don't have interests, I have nothing really connected that connects me to Palestine or to Palestinians and Israelis who work with the Palestinians to dismantle the occupation, apartheid, and to end genocide, because it's not going to be over soon if we don't stop it. Other than that, I have no agenda. So it's justice and human rights, and it's incredibly serious, the censorship and the self-censorship that survive in this country. The last point is I'm really shocked, and let me tell you why. And this is something that I really want you to understand, because this is something that makes... Everything okay?
Sorry, I forgot the third point.
No, I do remember. This is why I was writing it. The settlements. Mm-hmm. Now, had we had this discussion on any point in time before October 2023, my response would have been the same, just to be on the same side, because I've, like many others before me, including my predecessor, who wrote an incredibly powerful report on the legality of the occupation in 2017. And his predecessor's predecessor, John Dugard, had spoken of, as a South African judge, had spoken of Israel as practicing apartheid, of embodying settler colonial endeavor, and repressing the Palestinians' right of self-determination. And these are things that then Michael Link and Richard Falk, myself, have unpacked better. But this is the tradition of this mandate, really going to the core of the matter. So, settlements are illegal, are very illegal, are so illegal that they might entail criminal responsibilities, because the constitution of the creation of settlements, so of colonies for people from the occupying, in this case, from the occupying power into the occupied territory, while also forcibly transferring the native population, this is so criminal that cannot be tolerated. And it's a grave breach of international humanitarian law and might lead to international. So it's a war crime that is not just attributable to the state, but can also entail responsibilities of those who ordered this. And this has been true as of 1967. Israel has quietly been building colonies after colonies after colonies, violating that norm that is for me the first and foremost prohibition of settler colonialism in international law. Why so? Because when you read the rationale of this norm, what was the rationale in 1949 to have this norm, this prohibition, which are two prohibitions in one, prohibition of deportation and forcible transfer, and transfer of civilians, so not deportation, transfer of civilians from the occupying power into the occupied territory. German colonization. It was written reminding ourselves of what Germany had, the Third Reich had done across Europe. So it was pretty clear. It's illegal. It's illegal. And despite that, member states have continued to tolerate it. And this is why the Global South was saying, but this is illegal. Absolutely illegal. This is colonialism. And it has been tolerated. It has been tolerated largely because of Israel. And even when the Security Council, in 2016, it was not the first time, but yet another time, declares that these are war crimes and have to be dismantled. No one really followed, but no one, when I say no one, I say no one. I mean no one. And other than criticism, member states like Germany and my own countries or others have condemned the expansion of settlements. But what have they done to stop it? So we have the norms allow us to be critical, but then we do not follow the words with deeds. And therefore the legality has become more and more normalized, to the point that even debating whether to label a product that emanates from an international crime has taken the European Union 5 years. It tells you something about how much we tend to make excuses for the illegality of the occupation rather than to find to find ways to bring it to an end. The European Union continues to be an important trading partner of Israel. And Israel trades products from the settlements. But it's unlawful, and all the more now. The ICJ advisory opinion that was referred to of last year says, and this is the highest international court, the highest judicial body in the world, says that the occupation is unlawful and must be dismantled totally and unconditionally. It's not unlawful just because it violates the rights of the Palestinians here and there. No, but because it constitutes annexation. It works as a vehicle so that Israel can take land and resources from the Palestinians while displacing the Palestinians. It amounts to racial discrimination and apartheid, and it violates permanently, it leads to a permanent violation of the right of self-determination of the Palestinians, which is the right of the Palestinians to exist as a people, not to be erased. This is why I say genocide, ultimately. This is like Ras Sigal was saying, it has taken me a long time, but he was saying on 12 October 2023, this is a textbook case of genocide. Why so? Because he's a genocide scholar, and he has studied settler colonial genocides, and this is what I concluded last October. This is the first settler colonial genocide to ever be litigated before an international court. So the cry for justice in this case is as loud as ever. But now, going back to your question, it's unconscionable that universities maintain relations with settlements, with anything that has to do with the occupied Palestinian territory, not just the settlements, the military system, and the exploitation of resources. And excuse me, we cannot continue to pretend that the settlements are something, an illegal act on its own. Like we couldn't pretend that the apartheid that South Africa practiced against the black South Africa with something identifiable, where the evidence was identifiable only in the Bantustan. No, Israel is an apartheid state that maintains an unlawful occupation to realize Greater Israel. And now they are saying that as loud as ever. Everyone who has been following the situation in Palestine for a while understands it, because this has been predicated upon taking of the land that God has given to the Jewish people, and there shouldn't be anyone else between the river and the sea. And then now they say with the utmost clarity. So today, if the universities do not cut ties with this unlawful endeavor, it's time to hold them accountable. Because the laws are there, the enforcement mechanisms do not seem to work. The next in line is courts. And courts, and I would say in other places, public opinion, but it might take long here to mobilize public opinion, or no, we don't know. But you have a lot of work to do, and I understand how difficult it is. I mean, as we were in the car, I was saying, I should be about 15 days here, seriously, and speak to journalists every day, to people like you every day, and we would find places. But really, guys, you need to be shaken, because you are paralyzed by your fear, by the sense of guilt that has been, I don't know, this is part of an indoctrination, but this is not normal. This is not normal. Human rights are not for people to write, for scholars to write books about. Human rights are to be enforced when they are violated. They are our armor as human beings. And we cannot expect that what's happening to the Israelis and the Palestinians doesn't touch us. As you feel the pain of the Palestinians, as you feel the pain of the Israelis, you should feel the pain of the Palestinians and anyone else who still suffers from the legacy of that system. I'm not saying that the problems of the global South are all attributable to colonial roots. However, it's something that as even our psychologists recognize what intergenerational trauma is. It applies to people regardless of the color of the skin. And slavery practiced for hundreds of years, and colonialism, the breaking of the ties of entire people, the disruption of culture, religion, cultural, religious practices, the destruction of the bond between entire population and the land. It's something that causes immense damage, irreparable damage. So I'm already allergic to the argument, it's past. No, look at the Jewish people. They've been using international law to get justice, even to get compensation after 50 years from Eastern countries who didn't recognize the need to return to the Jewish people their possessions when it was still possible. I understand the legal hurdle. But again, it should start with recognition, with acknowledgement, because it's so inhuman. And plus, excuse me, especially when you look at Palestine, it didn't happen hundreds of years ago. It has happened in many respects in our lifetime. And if we just look at what has happened as of 1967 or as of 1947-49. So again, this is our opportunity to deal with the past, to come to terms with the past, and to take responsibility. The reason why I'm so strong I feel so strong and obliged, led by a sense of responsibility in what I'm doing, is because I'm European, and because I want to be different. And I want to be proud of being European, but in this tragic moment, I cannot do that while Europe continues to consume itself in the legacy of the past.
Just to be cognizant of time, we have maybe 20 more minutes. Is that okay for you?
Yeah.
Yes, we have some people with mics already. Maybe you can go. Yeah.
No, we can also do a little bit more.
It's okay. Can you hear me?
Excuse us, we have to gossip. We can also do a little bit more because I'm very long in the answers.
Okay, if you have more
With
questions,
a mic
then
on is not really possible.
Please.
Gossip.
Firstly,
Thank you. I have the phone, but thank you. Thank you so much.
sorry. Firstly, thank you so much for coming to Munich. It's an honor to host you here. Really, we're all very excited and thankful that you came to speak to us.
As a native German, I understand. This is why, sorry, sarcasm is
yeah,
my...
there aren't many here. There actually aren't many here.
Oh,
but
yeah? How many Germans are here? Move the cameras away. Oh, no. Come on, probably the 5%. It's great. Thank you, guys.
There's more than I thought, actually, so that's good. But anyway, I wanted to extend upon actually the last question before, which was about the university, TUM, and its collaborations with Ariel University. So on the 20th of January, 2025, we sought dialogue with our university administration to talk about the collaboration with this illegal institution. Instead of engaging in dialogue, they trapped 30 students and staff in a room for 3 hours. The doors were locked. The police were called. Everyone was cautioned. Staff and students couldn't enter their own offices for 24 hours. Not just their own offices, the whole campus and all the students. No professor has come forward openly to kind of condemn this, by the way. So basically, those who sought this dialogue, which is one of the only tools we really have, were banned and criminalized by their own institution. So my questions to you would be, in this really hostile context, when the German media is also spreading misinformation about what happened and the fascist repression that we face here, how can we hold our university to account? How can we ensure that any research collaboration breaching international law is halted, not just Ariel University, there are many more at TUM, unfortunately, and that those institutions facilitating these problematic collaborations face legal consequences? Sorry, it's a long question.
No, thank you so much. And also,
you can respond immediately.
yes, just so that I don't forget, because it's beyond the question you asked me, but because I'm writing a report on the private sector, which includes, again, it's incredible how many branches this will this has. But we need to. I'm also going to look at the universities, and I was enlightened by the work of Maya Wind. I really encourage everyone to read this. It's an incredible contribution from an Israeli scholar about the role of universities across Israel, so not just the settlements. But I would like to receive this report if it has not been sent yet, and also if there is anything in writing that you have on this particular case, and then I'll comment on it. I'll share my thoughts, but thanks for bringing it to my knowledge.
Another question? Yeah.
Hi, Francesca. My name is Riem. And I have a question. There are people watching the LMU screening right now, what's happening here. And I can imagine that the police are just waiting to shut it down. If the slogan "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" is mentioned. So I wanted to ask you about your personal opinion about this slogan, and the fact that it even can lead to legal consequences here in Germany. And let's see what happens at LMU right now.
Okay.
One last question.
Yeah.
Here? There. Okay, there's someone with a mic.
It's surreal. It's really surreal.
Please.
Yeah. So first, just one side note, because you talked about black Africans being displayed in zoos earlier in European countries. This also happened here at the Oktoberfest, to mention that here. And my question is in regards to the ICJ. There's now a pro-Israeli judge, that's the acting president of the ICJ. Yeah, what effect will this have? How strong is her influence? Thanks.
3 questions.
I love German discussions in Germany. Thank you so much. Where to start with the first question? So, have you spoken to German lawyers? Do you have? I mean, because it's incredible. This story is incredible. I never heard anything as close to this. And again, I don't want to speak to this out because I really need to look at the case better. But it's shocking. What has been the reaction here in Germany in the face of this?
No reaction.
But have journalists written about this?
Yeah, it was written the university version. The university version, I think, was written about, if I'm not mistaken. But I think if someone has more idea, they can just. But yeah, I think almost none.
Criticized them and labeled anti-Semitic immediately.
Also, the university takes away your right to protest against it when you work on a governmental level. So when you're a Beamta here, you can't protest against the university. You give up that right.
I want to read you. No, I want to read something that I had prepared for the end, but I think it's very opportune. These are really, I'm speechless. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I do not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Now, the person who has written this doesn't have a controversial past, because especially here in Germany, before quoting anyone, I go and I check the pedigree. And frankly, he has quite a controversial past, because he sympathized with the Nazis in the very beginning. It's not that I've read his bios, books about him, but I read it on internet, and it's interesting because clearly he had understood the problem at the beginning, and he changed his mind as he went through. And now you find this call for justice, this alarm clock sort of in Holocaust museums in the US for sure. And it's so important that we understand the tragic, dangerous moment we all live in. It's scary. Today is Palestine, but it's becoming so normalized to beat up students, and this is not the only country, for standing for justice, simply for justice. And doesn't matter how you are called. Criticizing the state of Israel for its practices against the Palestinians is not anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic, and it's not anti-Semitic. And the fact that someone says that doesn't make my statement less real or less true. And so it's very hard, but we need to keep our reason and stand together, because this is as I know that my fellow human rights, special rapporteurs and human rights experts have firmly stood against this. And I know civil servants standing against this, and doctors, and then students. But probably it's time really to unite and stand together. And when I often say it's time to think together, again, I don't have solutions to every country, but in every country, because you need to understand the context. But the first thing that comes to mind is, where are the lawyers? There are wonderful scholars in these countries. What are they saying? Where are the guardians of the constitutions? What are the legal experts saying? What are the judges saying? Is it possible that the German society is so paralyzed? Because you cross the street as a deer, you are light struck, and what happens to you is how long this being light struck lasts. Because if it lasts too long, before you get back to your senses and run, you get hit and you get killed. And this is what's happening to our human rights system. This is not normal. What's happening in Germany is absolutely not normal. And the more I hear, and the more I'm shocked as a European, because this country has been lecturing the global South, and I know because I've been living in Arab countries and again in countries that would be called the global South for a long time. And your country has been lecturing about respecting fundamental freedoms, freedom of assembly, freedom of opinion. Seriously. I mean, again, this blows my mind. I don't know what the Germans are waiting for, to say enough, enough. Let's return to understand words for what they are. And also, this is again, just for you not to feel that you're totally lost and mad in a world that doesn't, in a society that doesn't seem to stand with people like you. I would say it's time of emergency. There is a lot of fog out there, but there is a yellow line. And this is, again, remember that there are rules, and these are rules that even your country has contributed to set or has committed to abide by. And if your freedoms, freedom of expression and freedom of association are violated, you need to seek recourse, legal recourse. And the society needs to put those of you who are the part of the antibody of a healthy rule of law society need to stick together and help each other so that the legal expenses can be covered. And even if this is a case where individuals or organizations, even if you don't win, you don't lose. Because this is the path. Again, I've seen the courts in these countries doing incredibly important things, including for refugees. Back in the days, I don't know where they are right now. But let's use all avenues possible before it's too late. Don't be passive victims of such abusive practices, because you know your silence, not standing up, not defending yourselves, normalizes this state of affairs. It's not normal, and it shouldn't be normalized. And sorry if I'm passionate about that, but again, I see this happening in my own country, and this is the place where our children eventually are going to grow. And I don't want to see the continual erasure and dismantlement of the system that has been built with the blood and sweat of so many. And the Oktoberfest thing, which year? Okay, doesn't matter. But the beginning of the century, 19. No, but this is why I'm saying we need to own that our ancestors, our grandfathers and grandfathers have done much worse. Oops. Oh man.
That was poor. I think it's okay. Just a plant.
Just a plant.
Just a plant.
Even the plant cannot stand.
Even the plant cannot stand.
Yes, plant, sorry.
Was the land of my grandfather.
Is it real?
No.
Okay. You don't make this.
You spoke about the grandfathers and therefore.
Touché. Yeah, but you know, I mean, it's been much worse because it's not just a normal saying. Yes, let's say we have committed genocide against the Jewish people. I say that as an Italian. But you know why? We have discriminated the Jewish people for much longer than the past century. The discrimination against the Jewish people and the other come from afar. whomever didn't conform with white Christian patriarchy. This is our roots. Either we embrace, we understand, we unpack the kind of discrimination that comes from afar, or we'll be, yeah. From the river to the sea. Has anyone seen the maps on full display by the ICC wanted for war crimes and crimes against humanity, Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, exposed at the UN General Assembly? It seemed to me that it was from the river to the sea. What has been the reaction of the German government in the face of this? And what has been the reaction of the German government in the face of violent settlers assaulting day in and day out Palestinians, defenseless Palestinians in the West Bank? Let's not even talk about Gaza, because I know that, we do not have the entire week to, to talk about everything. But look, I encourage everyone who's listening to take a book, really. Rashid Khalidi, 100 Years of Palestine, or if you don't like Rashid Khalidi because he's an American of Palestinian, as an American Palestinian, maybe it might be biased to a German reader. So why don't you look at really Sima Flapam or Avi Schleim or Ilan Pape, but even Benny Morris, the creation of the refugee problem. Benny Morris is known as a Ronnie, correct me if I'm wrong, he proclaims himself as a Zionist, so he's not particularly sympathetic to the Palestinians. I think that in the years 2000 he also said that the problems of the past were that Israel didn't finish the job. So please read Benny Morris and see where the problem for the Palestinians and the resentments against the Israelis comes from. And I really don't know how the Palestinians have been so quiet and so calm and so gentle, which doesn't excuse any violence that has been committed against Israeli civilians. Just for the record, I have condemned the crimes that have been committed against Israeli civilians on October 7, and including those prior to October 7, and probably after, because it's not going to finish if it continues this way. However, an illegal act of stemming from the occupied population against the occupier, which subjects the occupied population to oppression, apartheid, annexation, racial discrimination, and all the other crimes that have been identified over the years, doesn't make the rights of self-determination and the resistance that the right of self-determination entails unlawful. While an unlawful an unlawful endeavor, like the one that Israel maintains over the Palestinians, taints of unlawfulness pretty much everything it does. This is the reality. So it's not about excusing any violence that has been used against the Israelis. Of course, I feel the trauma of the Israelis, but you know why? Because I understand also the trauma of the Palestinians. And if you don't see the need, if someone in this country doesn't see the need to recognize and to empathize with both, it's because their moral compass is broken, and there is probably a problem of racial bias. There is no other way to get out of it. And just to conclude, from the river to the sea, it's a sentence. And the reason why I understand it, and Israel says, the state of Israel says, by chanting these, they're saying that the pro-Palestinians are saying that they're going to throw the Jewish people in the sea. Well, if this is what any of you is singing, stay away from me. Don't even come to my lectures. Because here, it's not about killing anyone or committing violence against anyone. And I will always firmly stand against anyone who thinks that you can do the injustice of the past by committing more injustice. This is a settler colonial endeavor. And settler colonial endeavors change the state of the land and of the people dramatically. And still, while there are both Israelis and Palestinians living there, the reality in which they live is one of brutal apartheid. And those without rights right now between the river and the sea, as my dear friend, who's no longer among us, but he was a bulwark of sanity, an Israeli-Italian professor, a genocide scholar, Alon Confino, used to say, and like many others, both Palestinians and Israelis, between the river and the sea, it's the Palestinians who do not have rights. And it's for the Palestinians' rights that we have to come together, because in the liberation of the Palestinians from this system of oppression, there will also be the liberation of the Israeli Jews, even if they don't see this today. Voilà.
We are officially at 7 now, but maybe we can take one last round of questions.
Yeah.
3 questions.
Yes.
And oh, yeah, I think maybe there was a last comment on the ICJ question. The pro-Israeli judge.
Sorry. Look, I don't like expressing myself in these terms, pro-Israel, anti-Israel. The Justice Setiabunde has expressed problematic statements because again, lawyers are resort to very complex reasoning, but premised upon one simple thing: facts. And if you get the facts wrong, chances are that your legal assessment will be wrong. And as someone who knows the question of Palestine fairly well, from an historical point of view, her reasoning is premised upon the wrong reading of history. She's likely to be the next president of the International Court of Justice, but however, the other members remain the same. So she has voted against, let's say, I understand why you say pro-Israel, because she has taken a stand against, for example, the provisional measures that the rest of the ICJ judges ordered in the case of Palestine, including in the ICJ advisory opinion on the legality of the occupation. However, she's one among others, so I personally don't think that she can do much harm other than, okay, she is the president, so she has more prerogatives. But again, in the face of this, and also, you know what, is that eventually the ICJ advisory opinion on the legality of the occupation, I believe, has been such a landslide in terms of so revolutionary, so historical, because there was a lot of support, a lot of participation from member states. There were 60 submissions to the ICJ. So, the court was also comforted by how the law is interpreted by each country. And there were so many submissions denouncing the apartheid regime, which was not part of the question asked to the court. The court was asked to pronounce itself on the possible consequences of an occupation that violates the law of self-determination of the Palestinians in such a protracted way. Therefore, I say that it's very important that member states continue to make submissions and join the case initiated by South Africa against Israel and Nicaragua against Germany.
So one last round of questions. Are people with mics there? So one of them. Can you please keep the question short?
Yes, very direct. Thank you for coming. Like this? Yes. Thank you for coming, Ms. Albanese. Your position on mobilization, legal battle, and resistance has become very clear. But what strategy could you please sketch a strategy or give some ideas on how could we change or shape the predominant discourse about Palestine in Germany? which is locked and blinded in Israel's cold right to defend itself, towards something more critical that could lead to policy change.
Thank you. The next one there.
Hi. Okay. Speaking?
They are the ones.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Okay, maybe you can wait. Can you go ahead, please?
I don't have a question.
Maybe then we wait for the question.
Hi. Okay. I have a question mostly regarding the legal language that or that I've also been hearing within the room. So just for a bit of context, I'm going to try and hurry it up. I am Namibian, and I grew up in Namibia. I was born. My parents were some of the first who lived through Namibia's pre-independence time, and so apartheid for me, within its language, is a very specific context that alludes to a racial hierarchy that was enforced predominantly by a very white minority, a very minority white population, onto black people. And it comes into discourse, I guess, when people talk about the relationship between Israel and Palestine. It feels wrong, I guess, on my end. And so the question that I have is it necessary to talk about it in this context? Because it feels like, I mean, I'm now, as I'm a bit older, I'm trying to read up a bit more history about Namibia and whatever that's gotten lost in time. And a lot of the entries that you find now online, if you look up apartheid, have to do with Israel and that classification of its occupation in Palestine. Whereas, for example, people are able to properly characterize racial segregation in the United States as racial segregation, and apartheid being something that has a very Namibian African context and indentured labor, etc. So I just wanted to ask why the language there specifically alludes to apartheid, and why maybe not new languages been able to be found to describe or talk
Sorry,
about
let
that.
me get it, because I want to understand your question. So I don't want to attribute words to you that you have not said, but so you think that the use of the apartheid framework is not appropriate, or settler colonialism is not appropriate for Palestine?
Of apartheid is not
Of
appropriate.
apartheid. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
And do we have the last bit? Can you please be quick?
Yes, thank you. I don't live in Germany. I live in Serbia, and I came for these events. I don't think you know, because it's not in the mainstream media or any media, that Serbian students have been protesting for 3 months now. So this is my message, just to underline what Francesca has been saying yesterday and today, that when you ask yourselves what to do, and when you are afraid, you need to be brave and need to risk your everything, because that is activism. Activism is not walk in the park. I was part of the student protest in 96, 97 against Milosevic. We were severely beaten up, arrested, repressed, and so on, but we didn't give up, as these students today are not giving up under repression of authoritarian dictatorship that we have in Serbia. So, yes, please be brave and block universities. Don't ask how to change the narrative. You will change the narrative. Occupy your universities. And yes, risk everything, because everything is in line. Thank you.
So, now can I say something? I'm so glad you asked this question, because I don't know how to bring it to the discussion. Some of my best friends where I live in Tunisia are Serbians, and they're really been part of they are my coping mechanism. I don't know if they will see that, but hi, Buddha Maya. But we have been elated to see the students protesting, and again, I see students and protesting, and I'm happy, because it means that someone is still alive here, in terms of there is a humanity. But it was beautiful to see that this long march attracted people there were people bringing food, and so it has been an awakening march where other people have joined. So yes, please look at what is happening in Serbia, and there are political changes, because eventually I know that the system becomes violent when it's weak. and but we will get there. Accountability. Look, justice is something that cannot be achieved through one strategy or one group of people. Here, the violence is so widespread, so structural, so systemic, and that I often say in the image of David versus Goliath that I've often, I mean, of course, Israel uses it because it's biblical origin, but I do see, I've often seen the Palestinians as David versus Goliath, although now it's clear that the David is facing many Goliaths. And this is why there is a need to mobilize at different level. Activists, scholars, journalists, again, when I say people from all walks of life are called upon not staying silent, not sitting idle, feel very compelled to take a stance, because you already see that. It's already happening in your own country. Probably it could be intuited years ago, because Germany has never been a place where talking about Palestine was so kosher. Can I say that? Is it cultural appropriation? Sorry. And it was not okay. It has always been very problematic. Why can't you just talk about that? I mean, what's your problem? Because let's be honest. I mean, it's true. The genocide is true and should always be remembered. But we should also remember that the price has been paid not only by the Jewish people and all the others who have been genocided in the Holocaust, before the Holocaust, but for that specific Holocaust, the genocide, the price has also been imposed on the Palestinians, who had nothing to do with it, despite what the ICC wanted for war crimes and crimes against humanity, Benjamin Netanyahu says. So, again, the mobilization needs to happen, but first of all, there is a need to feel this sense of responsibility, and then to equip yourselves of what your weapons are in your intellect, how to use it. Educate yourself about the facts and about the legal arguments. Unite with others. Alone we are frail, but if we stand all together against it, against this systemic violence, this structural violence, which is transnational, clearly, we cannot be all arrested. We cannot be all fired. We cannot be all, yeah. My default thinking goes to accountability. So justice is not just accountability, but is also accountability. And this is where my mind is. Member states need to abide by the law. If they don't do that, they have to be held accountable. And including their leaders, their political leaders, when they contribute to something as serious as the commission of international crimes, including war crimes. And then businesses, charities, pension funds, universities, anyone who deal and profits, trade, buys, sells to the occupation, to the unlawful endeavor that Israel maintains against the Palestinians, must be held accountable. So there is find all lawyers out there who have an inch of humanity and try to turn that inch of humanity into a sparkle to defend human rights in this country, which also means defend human rights for the Palestinians, and I insist, for the Israelis, because the Israelis are not in a good place right now. A society that turns into genocidal is not in a nice place and needs to be brought back to reason in the most peaceful way, because before it turns even more violent. Why apartheid is applicable it's not only, it's fully applicable to the case of Palestine. And it's not just what, I often say in my statements, in fact, that southern Africa, which is not just South Africa, but also Namibia, Southern Africa has shown us, has given the term apartheid to the world. But in fact, apartheid is an essential element of settler colonialism. Because, and this is, again, I'm talking broadly, and then I will go to the legal application of it, to the legal implications of it. But apartheid is racial segregation, domination of one racial group over another. And this is not something limited to South Africa. The reason why it was not called apartheid in the United States, I don't know, but I've wondered myself, because the racial segregation was so extreme that it was not that, I mean, in many respects, it was not that different. I mean, the pettiness of certain acts remembered apartheid South Africa. However, there is a convention on the punishment of the crimes of apartheid that is a universal instrument. It says it refers to practices of racial domination that are similar to those practiced in South Africa, but that might be identified elsewhere, and that translate into the commission of inhumane acts in order to maintain this racial domination by one group over another or others. Think that there are legal scholars and others who are even talking of global apartheid. And this is something that really blew my mind when I heard this. I say, it's not possible because crimes can be, international crimes can be attributable to a state. So how it's possible that it's, and then read. All of us have our biases and limitations, and this is what the beauty of books and other people and the debates and other people's thinking, even when it challenges our boundaries. Together we think, we discuss, and together we grow. So people like, scholars like Richard Falk and others, and I really encourage you to read about global apartheid because it's really mind-blowing. But again, if you think of a system of racial domination of one group over another or others, you think that it could be a transnational crime today. It's very huge. How do we get there? We need to start educating ourselves about all this, and again, Palestine has given the opportunity to fully understand what apartheid is. And the legal dualism that it's applied to the Palestinians is the backbone of apartheid. Because apartheid is, settler colonialism is discriminatory in nature, is racist in nature, it's exploitative in nature. However, when it's entrenched in the law, the legal dualism of apartheid becomes structural. And Israel practices apartheid in the occupied, again, Amnesty International has written about that. Look at even inside Israel, there are discriminatory laws and practices vis-à-vis the Palestinians compared to the Israeli Jews. The Palestinians, in fact, please don't call them Israeli Arabs. They are Palestinians with Israeli citizenship who do not enjoy their self-determination as part of Israel because they are not treated equally. In certain countries, the most advanced democracies, minorities are privileged as minorities because they are different and so they are super protected. But in Israel, no. They are treated like second-class citizens. And they're not the only ones, but yeah, and it's a problem. So it's apartheid. But in the West Bank, but even Israel has maintained, and I encourage you to to read or watch what Amnesty International has produced on apartheid. And again, they tell you the fragmentation, the segregation of the Palestinians, the Gaza ghetto with its own rules, and the Palestinians in the West Bank with their own forms of oppression, the Palestinians in Jerusalem separated from all others. And yes, they can access Israel, but they are not citizens of the state. So, and the refugees, they are all fragmented. So you have the segregation, but also different rules imposed to various pieces of the land, and which is made to weaken the people and to prevent their unity. But also, why there is military law applied to the Palestinians? Again, as I said, military ruled, and you should see the rules. If you're a Palestinian, you can be arrested for the books you read, for the friends you have, and think of up to 10 years in jail for having participated into a gathering of 10 or more people not authorized by the army. A vigil, a funeral, a wedding can be disrupted and lead to the arrest of people up to 10 years if this was not authorized by the army. And I've written an entire report about that. And also the Palestinians have to, the occupied Palestinian territory has the aesthetic of a prison, with the gates, the segregated roads, the revolving door, and then the cameras, the surveillance, and then the permits. There are hundreds of permits that Palestinians have to apply to. And then there are the bans. If you want to build a house, to change residence, to move from one university to another, to study abroad, to return from abroad, you need a permit for everything, for about 100 instances of life. And the occupation is unlawful. So, and military law is enforced through military courts. The Palestinians are the only people in the world who have been tried in military courts for 57 years, including children as young as the age of 12. So how is it not apartheid? While the settlers while the settlers who shouldn't be there in the first place are above the law, even the Israeli laws that protect them doesn't apply to them because they can commit any type of violation and abuse against the Palestinians and it doesn't count. You know why? Because the Palestinians are not even seen. Adult, children, I asked once an Israeli soldier, no, sorry, it was not me asking. In my report, I was quoting a documentary when an Israeli soldier was asked, why do you do this to children? And he asked, which children? And it's interesting, because if you read the Nuremberg trials, you should see how the Nazi officials were talking about Jewish children. They were a security threat, because the Jewish people were treated as a security threat, as a threat to the security of the state. What a nice note to end on. Serbia. Okay. And then we close. Okay. Serbia. No, and again, I think I said it, but this shall inspire everyone. Because again, there is one way to resist to this is together. And with this, I end, because I've spoken about yes. Thank you so much, everyone. And by the way, remember, it's not that I have a no picture policy, but if you take the picture, you promise you do something. Thank you very much for the warm reception. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.